Welcome back to Chakde System Design series. In this episode, we will be talking about performance optimization. To be more precise, we are going to talk about asset optimization. So what are these assets? So assets like you have your images, you have your videos, you have font, you have CSS, you have JavaScript, right? How can you basically optimize so that when you load these assets, these actually boost up the performance of your application, right? We will be talking about all possible sort of techniques that will help you to boost up the web application, or you can say web performance, because of these assets and how you are basically managing it. In the previous episode, we have talked about the network optimization. If you haven't watched that network optimization episode, I will request you, after completing this particular episode, go and check that out. That is also going to help you with lot of optimization technique that you can help to improve your network layer. Okay, with this, let's get started. But again, before we start, press on the bell icon and don't forget to subscribe. Let's get started. Asset optimization. Let's quickly have a glimpses of how we can optimize our images, videos, font, CSS, JavaScript, right? We are going to cover these things in depth, but let's have a glimpses. Okay, so when we talk about images, right? So images, what we are going to do, we are going to learn about the compression techniques. So like what are the things, how you can do, what are the basically tools basically which can help you. We'll be talking about lazy loading, few of the things we have actually learned in the previous episode, but still there are so many other things which we are going to learn. We are going to learn the progressive enhancement. We are going to learn about client HTTP hint, basically, which will help you to boost the loading of the images for the different devices. We are going to learn about responsive images. We are going to learn about adaptive images. So when we say your adaptive images, in a sense, consider you have multiple cores in your system, you are using in a power save mode, you are basically using for you can say less memory devices. All of these basically you can leverage these stuff. Okay, we will be talking about blur effect, how you can leverage that. There is a technique basically in order to have a better performance. We will be talking about the solid primary color technique as well related to the images. These are the something that we are going to cover related to the images, and there will be lot more things which are not listed over here, but yeah, keep watching, we'll see that. Okay, in terms of the videos, what we are going to talk about, progressive enhancement. Progressive enhancement is one of the cool and the important thing. Replace your gifs with videos. We are going to talk about this, why so, right? Then we are going to talk about your responsive poster images. Poster, in a sense, every video have the static images which is shown before you actually videos start playing. So how you can basically optimize that, right? We will be talking about streaming techniques. We will be talking about videos with no audio, and even if it has audio, how you can leverage and optimize it. So it's not limited to that. There are so many things that will come into the picture, like your localization, and a lot more things will come into the picture when we'll be talking about that. Font. So how to optimize font? So font display operator or decorator, right? If you haven't heard about it, if you don't know it, must watch. This is very cool. A small thing which helps you to basically optimize your web page. Second is flout. Flout technique with classes. If you don't know, again, this is very cool. You should know data URI technique. So in data URI, you can basically convert something into your URI and basically use it instead of the URL, right? So you can use the preload technique. We can have a progressive enhancement, which is quite similar to we have enhancement in all the other track, but again, this is more relevant to the fonts. Then we have a async way to load your CSS, which contains some dependency on the fonts. Now we have something very interesting which is called font face observer. Font face observer. Okay, this is again very cool because it gives you a lot of control in terms of how you wanted to load font and when you wanted to basically load the font. So coming to the CSS, we have no doubt we have lazy loading technique we'll be talking about. We have already covered a couple of the techniques related to the CSS in the previous episode. We'll be talking about critical CSS rendering, and we will be covering a lot more other things related to the CSS. Okay, now coming to the JavaScript, the favorite of most of the developer, which is JS versus async. We'll be talking about, although some glimpses we have gone in the previous episode also. We will be talking about web worker, how you can leverage the performance optimization with the web worker. We'll be talking about lazy loading and much more thing related to the JavaScript. Few things are hidden secret. So keep watching the video till the end. There are so many interesting things that's are waiting for you. Image optimization is one of the most underrated asset. Image is an asset basically where people think about, okay, this is something which is provided by a designer, just use it, what we can do on top of it, right? That is a myth basically. And most of the website basically who uses these images heavily are goes for a toss because of the images load time and all sort of things. So we are going to talk about very small techniques which is going to boost the application of your load time performance, and you can say any interaction that you do which involves the loading of the images, right? Techniques like we are going to talk about the compression, lazy loading, progressive enhancement, right? Responsive images. We are going to talk about a small header which can give you enrich the obviously the quality of the images to be loaded, and definitely the load time as well. Adaptive media loading, right? We are going to talk about a small technique like sprite, right? Using the solid background color as a replacement to the image until unless the image are loaded, and a small you can say optimization technique. So watch this till the end and you definitely are going to learn a lot of you can say techniques regarding the image optimization. So keep watching. Image compression, a very small but very powerful technique, right? Just making sure the images that you are basically using is compressed, right? And you are using the right side of basically the image. Now, what benefit it is going to give? Definitely it is going to reduce the website load time, right? It is going to save your bandwidth obviously. Then you have to bear less server cost, less resources, and definitely less money you have to bear. Again, it is going to improve the user experience because your load time got reduced. Similarly, if your load time of the website or web app basically got reduced, your enhancement, your SEO ranking will improve, right? All of those benefit you are getting. So basically, whenever you get those assets, make sure those are compressed properly. If not, you can do it yourself. You don't have to depend on any of the designer. How to leverage that? There are so many, you can say, options on the website which is available, like JPG optimizer. There is a Kragen, there is a tiny PNG, there is a Optimizilla, Zepec.io, compressor.io. There are so many, you can say, online compressor which are available, which will give you a technique in order to optimize, right? So now we will be talking about two major optimization. Say suppose you are optimizing your JPG image or you are going to optimize your PNG image, right? We will talk about some of the figures in different you can say platform, where you will see a good amount of compression that is provided by these platforms, right? So in case of JPG, you can see around 66% compression is done on 80 KB image. Similarly, it ranges from 13% to approximate 67-68%, which you can see over here, right, in the different platform. Similarly, when you talk about any PNG image, so it starts from somewhere like 17% and it somewhere goes to 80+%, right? So you can see if you are having a good image, it can reduce like 80% compression, dude. It's huge, right? It can give you a lot of benefit. So why don't you do that? Again, just make sure whenever you do a compression, you either do a lossy or lossless depending on your use case, how much perfection you want in your images to be loaded. So based on that, you choose that, or definitely your lossy compression are more powerful as compared to, you can say, lossless, or where the compression rate is a bit low. Based on this, make a decision and definitely go for it, and you will see definitely a lot of benefit. And you might have seen any of the online, like you use WhatsApp or Facebook, you upload an image, you can compare the image that you uploaded and the image what got uploaded, try downloading, you will see a huge delta in terms of, because those are the compressed images, and they wanted to do that in order to have the further rendering, right? So progressive enhancement is very important. Why? Using small techniques, you can leverage a lot of benefit in terms of your optimization and loading of these images. What it meant by, there are different the image formats, right? And those image format, each and every image format are for some purpose, right? And everything comes with a cost, right? FF is something which is most optimized format that we have. WebP is next, then you can have PNG, you can say JPG, and lot more, right? If we can leverage these images and we can ask browser, to just check if they support, you can say, the decoding and uncompression of this, you can say, a WIF format or the WebP, and they can leverage and use it. Go and download. If not, have a fallback as in JPEG, right? How we can do that? We can have an element called like picture, we can have multiple sources, and we can have a IMG as in fallback. This is a small technique which is basically going to boost, you can say, the loading of your images. It's again very underrated. Try it out and you will see a benefit. Device pixel ratio, which is called DPR, right? Which is very small but very powerful. It's not just help you to basically load your asset, optimize your asset, but also the better experience to the user. Why? Let's understand what is this DPR basically. You have to understand one important thing. One CSS pixel is not equivalent to the one pixel of your device. Oh, what? Okay, let's talk again. Your one CSS pixel is may or may not be equal to your device pixel. What it meant by, depending on the resolution of your device, like we talk about, you have a 4K TV, right? You have a resolution of 1024. Sometimes we have resolution of 1900 something, right? In that particular case, your DPR may change, right? What it meant by, your DPR can be one, it can be two, it can be multiple other. How it basically calculated, depending on if one CSS pixel is equivalent to, you can say, two grid you can see in your device, right? In that particular case, this is DPR2. In this particular case, you see one CSS pixel is equivalent to three grids, like 3 by 3 grid in your device, right? In that particular case, you have a DPR of 3. How it is going to impact? Let's understand. It's very important. So consider you have a 4K TV, you have a DPR of, say, suppose 2, right? In that particular case, you wanted to load an image and showcase an image in a 500 pixel to the users. But if you load 500 pixel image from the remote in order to show to the user, it will see as an pixel rated, because how many device pixel was required in order to load that image? It was 500 into 2, right? Why? Because 1000 pixel of that device was there in your 500 CSS pixel. Then why did you load an image which was smaller, but you stretch that image in order to show in the 1000 pixel in that particular device? That's why always make sure when you are making a request, you do consider your DPR in order to load the right set of images and have a better, you can say, visibility and the better image quality to the users. Now, how to get this DPR? Very simple. In your window, it is exposed basically browser, you get a device pixel ratio. Whenever you make a request to the image, you do a small computation and ask for the respective, you can say, size of the image in order to have a precise and well quality image that need to be shown to the user. Perfect. Okay, we just learned about the DPR, right? So in that particular case, how we can leverage it? So consider example when we have responsive, you can say, website, or we want to write our logic in a such a way where automatically, depending on the DPR, I can load the different size of the images. Can this be automated? Yes, it can be. You have something called IMG SRC set. SRC set is very powerful. You can define multiple, you can say, images and the parameter on which you wanted to load different thing. So in our case, we wanted to first go with the DPR. In case of 2 DPR or 3 DPR, we wanted to load different images. Like how it is going to look like. So take this example. This is how it is going to look like. Okay, in 1x basically you will see you can pass the different parameter, but in case of 2x you can pass a different parameter and automatically your images will be loaded accordingly, right? So this is how automatically your you can say SRC set can help you to get leverage the different DPR. But there can be multiple different complex scenarios. You just don't want to basically limit on the DPR. There can be scenarios where you wanted to load different images depending on what size your images are going to be loaded, right? On what container with the different sizes. So in this particular case, if you see, you have sizes of like it is going to take minimum 70% of your width, right? In that particular case, you have defined different width, which says that if your width where image is going to be rendered is at near 300, you can say, width, which is in terms of the percentage, and this is 600, this is 1200, this is 2000, right? In that particular case, basically automatically load different images over here. Okay, this works, but again there can be more complex scenarios. What if at the time of first load it is okay, but when a person is basically doing a different resolution or different resize, right? We want this to be loaded in different resolution, right? So your images may not take the 70% of your width always. That may take 100% or may take 50% depending on what resolution your image is going to be rendered. How we can do that, how we can leverage in this particular case, we see the example that we talked about. This is a different width in which you can say your images are going to be rendered, and different size of images are basically called, right? Now, what we were talking about the breakpoint. What it meant by, let's understand from this very important concept. Okay, what we are saying, instead of giving just one size, I can provide multiple sizes which are different breakpoint, how we write in the normal CSS, right? We can have a responsive breakpoints which says that at a minimum width of this em, this, these are the multiple, you can say, breakpoint on which I wanted to consider my container size to be this 2000 pixel, right? So when my container size is like 2000 pixel for this is 33%, you can say, vertical width, and this is viewport width, and this is the calculation basically done. You wanted to remove, like you don't want to consider some margin and padding, some complex logic you can write over here in order to define your breakpoints, right? Based on that, whatever the output is computed, you can say dimension is, based on that you just load this particular, you can say, 2000 pixel width or 1200 or 600 or 300, whatever the, but according to the breakpoint, whatever comes to the closer dimension, load it. So this is how you can write a complex thing. But again, there can be more complex scenarios you wanted to leverage. How you can do that? You can use pixels, pictures basically, right? This picture element is something you can define multiple sources, and you can have a fallback. In each of these sources you can have a media which considers as a breakpoint, and you can also write a logic which consider your DPR. You have multiple breakpoint, you can write a logic on the DPR as well, and finally you can have a image SRC which sits as in fallback. So you can do a lot of more complex and creative thing by using just a small technique, like you use the SRC set, you use pictures, and you can write lot complex thing. Out of box your browser will take care of lot more thing in order to load the best possible images. Adaptive media loading, right? This is a very advanced, and this is used by a lot of, you can say, good applications in order to leverage the better, you can say, in order to have a better optimization of their image loading, right? Or any of the asset basically that works, right? Let's understand, as the name suggests, adaptive, adapt yourself based on the where you are going to load and the scenarios in which you are going to load, right? What it meant by, if your network is slow, or your network is medium, or your network is fast, based on that you take a decision what best can be done. Similarly, on if your memory size of your device is low in which you are going to be consumed, use it accordingly, right? There can be other parameter, like on what core, basically how many cores of machine basically you are going to be loaded into, right? Let's use that. How to do that? Say suppose we have a home, we have a product, we have another, inside products we have product, right? And this product need to be loaded. So this component will take care of, if it is a slow, I will load a different set of thing. If it is a medium speed, basically I will load a bigger size. And if it is a very fast, probably along with this image, I will also show a play button in order to load the video itself, in order to have a preview of that. Okay. How to make those decisions? What are the things basically which can help? Let's talk about them one by one. One is your save data. So inside your navigator you have something called, it talks about either the saving mode is basically enabled for a particular device or not. Based on that you can take a decision. Second, what is the device memory? Based on either you have enough memory or not, you can take some decision. Third is a hardware concurrency. How many cores basically you are using in your laptop, so that I can do some multi-threading sort of thing internally in order to load some data, right? So those are very cool things that basically that can be leveraged. Now let's see how we can leverage each of these one by one. So first, save data. So consider you are on a power save mode where you wanted to basically make sure you wanted, the user wanted to save the data, right? In that particular case, you can have this navigator, add a logic which says that navigator.connection.saveData. If it is yes, in that particular case, basically you will write some logic and some background jobs basically you won't be doing, right? So you may not be want to do a heavy lifting, so you can change your logic based on that. Second, device memory. Say suppose you are loading your app on a mobile, or you wanted to load a app which is running on a PC which is does not have a good RAM basically, right? In that particular case, you can check the device memory and basically you can take a decision. Maybe say suppose you wanted to do some heavy computation or you wanted to leverage the storage like IndexedDB, right? So such decision can be taken based on the device memory as well. That is very good thing to leverage in a large scale application. Now, very, very cool and good technique which says that, say suppose I wanted to do some concurrent job. I wanted to spawn multiple workers, right? But again, how many threads I can basically run, that depends on number of cores that we have. How we can get to know? Using the hardware concurrency. Using hardware concurrency, we can get to know how many cores we have, and similarly, we can spawn those number of workers. This is damn cool, right? If you wanted to build a very high-end application with lot of optimization thinking in mind, and definitely the scale and where the users can basically leverage it, just go and try it out. Now let's talk about some advanced use cases where, say suppose you wanted to load an image, but you wanted to initially show the thumbnail, right? Once the thumbnail are loaded, probably depending on either that is a slow network or a high-end network, you wanted to do a autoplay or not, you can take that decision. Similarly, uh, applications like Tinder, they what they are doing basically, they load the number of images depending on which connection you are, right? If it is a 3G or you are a slow network, basically it will basically load less number of images, and for a higher network connectivity they will load a good images. Similarly, you can take a decision, only do a prefetch in a viewport link of with a 4G, where you can say if your connection is not good, and or you are in a data saving mode, right? You don't want to do a prefetch. These are so much cool thing. Just go and try it out and you will feel like you can definitely build a very high end optimized application, and that too with a variety of diverse users, right? Try it out. Small images with blur effect, this is another very cool technique. What it meant by, you might have seen multiple applications or multiple apps using this technique. What they do basically, instead of not loading the images and showing this grayish color which doesn't look good, what they do, they have a fallback of the images, and they have a very tiny images that actually spreads to the entire, you can say, the window in which you wanted to have your original image. But again, if you have to load a small image and stretch it to the big one, then definitely it will be pixel rated and lot more thing. But you will have the similar kind of gradients, if you remember, if you can see, right? And when actual image loads, it will be of same touch, color tone, so it will look very appealing. So Medium used to do that, and lot of more website basically do that. Now how to achieve that? You can have something like a very small image, very small, like 1 pixel or 2 pixel image, stretch that image to the 100%, which is using the background cover size as in cover, but use two different properties which is going to make it as very smooth and very appealing. One is your filter, use blur as in 5 pixel, and probably you can use a like when you're using this blur effect, in that particular case it won't look like as an pixel rated one, it will have a very defined touch. And obviously you can use WebKit and the different, you can say, browser support in order to have the fallbacks, right? So this is a very cool technique which is used by multiple, you can say, web apps. Try it out. Let's talk about another very cool and simple technique, so which is your show your primary color as in background until unless your images are loaded, right? This is used by Google images. Basically what it does, whenever you load an image, they have a fallback or a primary image configured. At the time of upload itself, they do some generation in order to identify that and have that as a metadata of your image, right? So when it is loading, it loads the primary image as in grid over here, and once your actual images comes, it actually replaces it. This is again a cool technique. Instead of just showing the empty or image is not loaded, that doesn't looks good, you can use this technique in order to basically showcase a good, you can say, progressive loading behavior, right? Try it out. CSS sprites. This technique is being used from long time, and this was used by Facebook. This was used by a lot more companies. Google, everyone uses. Even I see today the Netflix and multiple. You can even the YouTube basically uses this CSS sprite technique, where you have those thumbnail, and those thumbnail need to be shown at a different places, right? So consider these can be any images, right? And you wanted to have those images loaded into your screen. And if you talk about the cost, each and every individual images in our case is say suppose 2 KB, right? If there are like 20-30 images in our screen, obviously we are going to end up making multiple requests, blocking your rendering multiple times. On top of it, if you see the total data which got loaded, it may be 20 into 40, maybe 80 KB sort of data you are basically loading, right? Huge. Is there any better way to do that? Yes, there is a better way. What if I say these images are going to be clubbed together in a single image altogether in a virtual grid, right? So that these images are center aligned on that virtual grid, and each of these virtual grid of the same dimension. Even though, say suppose we wanted to use the images of different resolution, but the maximum grid which contains the virtual grid it contains, it has a pattern, right? What it meant by, you can create a CSS sprite something like this. What it says that your images are having a grid basically where each of these images are aligned, so that you can write a normal CSS logic which window basically you wanted to show. What it meant by, let's try to like assume, say suppose we have some logic, this is our entire window where I just wanted to show a icon which is present over here. What I will do, I will basically place my image in such a way that only that window can see this Facebook wala icon, right? And definitely my job is done. Rest everything is hidden. Just that window, I can peep a Facebook. My job is done. Similarly, if I wanted to showcase something like this Pinterest icon, what I will do, I will shift my image in such a way the window I created for that image actually fits over there, and I will be able to see that, right? So you can basically shuffle and reposition this sprite image so that you can showcase different icon in the different windows that you have. Now you can see the earlier we were talking about 80 KB some sort of images for this particular all these images to load. Now it may be approximate like 10 KB or even lesser than that. Why can't we leverage this? This is too good. Like you are loading a huge set of data in a single, you can say, image, and you are saving the size and the number of requests also. So if you haven't tried, go and try it out. Lazy loading. So as we have seen the lazy loading for the other asset, let's talk about the image lazy loading, right? So consider in this case, we have this viewport. In this viewport, only 2 images are visible, right? And there are multiple other images also, but those will come when I scroll. Why to load all the images in a single go when we don't have to basically show that to the user? What we can do lazy loading. We can write our own complex logic, like you can have intersection observer and lot more in order to load these images whenever required. But can we leverage something out of box which is provided by browser? Yeah. So browser basically give you something called attribute on top of the image element, which is loading, right? You can load these images either using lazy or you can use eager, right? What eager says, I want this on the high priority. I want it, right? Lazy says that, okay, dude, you take care of, and I trust you as a browser. You will make a decision whenever this image is required. You will load it without hampering the rendering of your web page and basically taking care of the performance. Cool. But again, there may be certain scenarios where you don't want to trust the browser because you may feel I have certain use cases and I wanted to handle it accordingly, right? So what you can do, you can use a library also, and you can use your intersection observer. What it does internally, I will tell you the technique. Basically, you have an image, it has data src as an image, right? Okay, it seems like, dude, it's an image and there is an image link and it will be loaded by the browser, right? Okay, it can be loaded as a lazy load, but it is going to be loaded. No, there's a difference. It is data src, right? It's not normal src. So what you have to do using some logic, or as in your custom logic, convert this data src into src is equal to turtle.png, right? Over there, when you convert this, you will have the capability, just use this src is equal to this, you will have the capability basically. Then your image will be loaded by the browser, right? How you can convert this data src? You can write some custom logic using this vanilla lazy loading, which gives you out of box capability. But again, you can write your intersection observer also in order to achieve it. Video optimization. This is another asset we'll be talking about in more detail. We will be talking about a lot of techniques that we wanted to do. And similarly, we have to understand that we have like YouTube, we have Netflix, multiple OTT basically, which we are using as a video platform, and we have so many other platforms also, which, or probably in your web app you wanted to use a video, right? So we should know what are the different techniques in order to leverage that. So we'll be discussing about the progressive enhancement. We'll be discussing about the, like, either we should use a GIF or the HTML5 in multiple places. Do we have any like poster images which we can use for our videos? Or we will be talking about the streamings. We'll be talking about the audio and the video separate thing. We'll be talking about the preload, right? So keep watching till the end, and there are so many exciting things that are waiting, and there are definitely new things that you are going to learn. Progressive enhancement in order to optimize your video, right? So this is quite similar to other progressive enhancement where we wanted to make sure, so the format of the file which is more optimized try to load it first, and if it is not available, then try to load the other format. In this particular case, WebM is something which is the most optimized and better performance with the quality and everything. And then we have MP4, which is obviously a bit heavier in terms of the size. So we leave on the browser, basically try to load this WebM. If you support it, well and good. If not, try to have a MP4 as a fallback, right? So this is how basically we can leverage progressive enhancement. There are multiple places where we wanted to show some animations, right? When I say animations, some videos basically. So a clip we wanted to probably show, maybe a preview of certain things that you might have seen in the Netflix or the YouTube, right? So there are multiple ways. One, you can use definitely a GIF, and other you can use a like HTML5 video player altogether, right? Which one to use? GIF does not have that much good quality if you wanted to support in multiple, you can say, devices. So that comes with some cost, right? But when you talk about HTML5 videos, you can convert it into the WebM, or you can use the MP4 as a fallback. Those have better quality and better control, right? So in order to mimic like as in GIF, you can basically use as an auto play. There are certain properties basically you can play. We will be talking about those properties going forward. But when you see in the dev tool, even the browser, the dev tool, Chrome tools, basically tells you, dude, if you are using a GIF, that is not the optimized. Please use the video format, that is far better. So you see the loading of the GIF basically takes a lot of, you can say, time, and you can save those time as well. So this was one of the snippet that was taken from the web.dev. So try and go and read more about those details. So let's talk about other optimizations. Responsive poster image. So we have to understand, till the time your video is not loaded, right? You may wanted to showcase some images to the user, or you sometimes say, suppose you wanted to show some images, some thumbnail you wanted to show, right? That can be achieved using a video attribute. You can see in this video attribute what we are doing. We have some controls you wanted to showcase. We have added a class, and this is a poster image which we wanted to showcase, right? And similarly, we have multiple sources. Depending on what source is supported by the browser, it will automatically load. Now there are certain CSS properties that we can use basically in order to make it a responsive poster, right? We added a poster, we can make it responsive by adding a position as in center and saying that its size should cover, like background size should cover the entire, you can say, video. And you can have different videos for the different, you can say, different poster images for different resolution. Those can be supported. In this our case, you see that 75 rem, I wanted to load a different image altogether. So using normal small CSS techniques, you can basically get a responsive poster images as well. Streaming, this is very important. Instead of downloading the entire file in a single go, you want to basically send the chunks, or you can say the packets from the server to the client, where those packets are basically clubbed together, and basically those are individually read and showcased in the video format, right? So we have covered this streaming in lot more detail in the Netflix system design. So just check out the Chakde System Design, Netflix System Design, and you will be able to see that how to basically stream, and you will be able to understand streaming in more better way, right? We talked about a lot of things like protocols, how the streaming basically works, and a lot more things are covered over there. Go and check it out. This is another like very small technique where if you don't need the audio, right, in the video, say suppose you wanted to play any video basically in the background where you don't want the audio altogether, right? So try to remove that, because that comes with a cost. And there are other techniques also, there are other reasons also where you probably wanted to remove the audio. Consider the same video, you wanted to support multiple audios, right? You can keep your video and audio in a separate form, and for the different languages you can download the audio and you can just sync by your local you can say client, right? So there can be local library basically which helps you to achieve that. Again, that we have discussed in more detail in our Netflix system design. You will be able to learn a lot more things when we talk about splitting your video and the audio, and leveraging your audio depending on what language a user wanted to basically view the video in, right? So again, and if you don't need the audio, just don't load it, it will optimize it. Platform based video dimension, this is again another video optimization technique where you wanted to load the different videos depending on for what resolution basically those are going to be loaded in, right? So you can, similar as in CSS, you can define your breakpoints. Over here you can define a media, like I wanted to load for all, you can have the portrait, and you can define the different media type, right? And on top of it you can define the breakpoints as well. It's like for this dimension I wanted to load this, and you can have a fallback where you don't define the media, it is going to be the fallback and it is going to be loaded at the last. you are leaving this responsibility on the browser depending on the different, you can say, media. And the breakpoint, browser, let browser decide, right? So this is another power, a small technique, but again very very powerful. Last but not least, so this is again very small technique, which is very powerful, which most of the folks, or you can say the OTT, basically leverage, which is you can have a preload video or the metadata information. What it meant by, say suppose you wanted to load this video at certain place in your application, you can preload. So that especially when you wanted to preload this for some banner, right, your home page, like you open the Netflix and you see there is a video player which is going around on the banner, right? Or you open any of the preview, you want that background to be loaded with some preview or the trailer that you wanted to run, right? So those kind of thing, basically you can do a preload. But again, if you don't want to preload the entire information, but you wanted to just preload the meta information, that can be done over here, which you can just pass. Either you don't want to preload, you wanted to let browser decide what to preload, and then again you have a metadata. So you can basically pass down, I just need the metadata, not the entire video basically to be downloaded. Those things can also be done. This is very small but very useful. Talk about font optimization. Dude, who optimizes font? I never even think about like optimizing the font, and you're talking about you can optimize the font. Yes, it do matter. You have to think about the website where the different fonts are used, right? Any of the blogging website or the website which has a lot of custom fonts basically used on the web page. In that case, if you don't optimize your fonts, then it is going to have may not have a good experience, right? Your initial load may be compromised, or the visibility of the text may be compromised, or the way it loads and showcases you the stylings may be compromised, right? There are so many cool fonts most of the folks wanted to have on their website. Everything comes with a cost, right? This is a diagram. Probably you may not be able to understand it right away, but end of this particular font optimization techniques, you will be able to relate it very well. So let's talk about a very overview. Try to avoid using the font face if possible, like trying to use the font family which is internal provided by the browser itself, which is one. Try to use data URI so that you don't have external dependency in order to load. Use float, you can say, with the class. What it meant by, so it will have a basically flash of the unstyled text, and then actual, you can say, style of the text will be represented, right? Use the font display you can say descriptor, which is a cool one. Try to use a preload. Okay, so if you are using data URI, so you have to think about blocking inline or having the asynchronous, right? And again, when you are using font, in that particular case, are you using the CSS, or you wanted to do with a two-phase rendering? When we say two-phase rendering, when once it will render with the without any style, and then it will actually render with the proper style, right? So when you talk about preload, they are critical, float with the preload, and obviously you can do a lot more complex combination of these things. So let's tackle one by one so that you have a better understanding of what this for FOUT font is, and what is this FOIT, right? So we will talk about those things in more detail. Let's get started. Font display descriptor, right? This is very small technique, but again, in order to understand this, we have to understand two small concepts. One is FOUT and second is FOIT, right? Font and FOIT. So what it meant by, so let's talk about what it meant by. So one says that it will flash the unstyled fonts first, and then it will load the actual font. Second, it says that flash of invisible text. What it meant by, I won't show anything until the texts are loaded, right? You can say fonts are loaded. Now, in the first case, if you see the unstyled, the fonts are the normal fonts, and then finally the actual fonts got applied. The second one, until as the fonts were loading, it doesn't show anything, and once the fonts got loaded, it showed something. Now, your actual content visibility got compromised in case of FOIT, and in case of FOIT, it got basically rendered something, right? So you have to take a call if you are okay to render something, showcase something as in text, and once the fonts are ready, you can basically use that. There is a small behavior, a small trick you can achieve the fort instead of foit. That is, you can have definitely multiple like multiple formats. We will be talking about that. The last part which I wanted to showcase is this, right? Okay, maybe I can change the color to something which is visible, which is this font display swap. It basically defines how you wanted to basically behave, like your browser should behave in case of once the fonts are loading. what will happen? It will basically swap the font once the actual fonts are ready, and it will render the unstyled fonts on the first cut, right? This is a small but very powerful technique. Progressive enhancement is again very important. So as we have seen this same progressive enhancement in multiple other assets as well, in this how it works, you have to see like woof 2 is more, you can say, performant and more optimized version of the font. Try to load it. If it doesn't, it is not available, try to load the woof, right? Similarly, there can be other format of the fonts as well. Try to load on the priority basis, where try to load the most optimized one and then go to the fallback which browser doesn't support, right? This is a very small but very powerful technique. So always have multiple fonts so that you always have a backup for any browser which is not supporting these different format or the latest you can format of the font. I'm going to tell you very small but very powerful technique, right? In your CSS, you might have used the font face, and you might have given your font family and some link of the SRC from where you wanted to load, right? Very interesting factor. If you don't use that font family anywhere in your stylings or anywhere in your HTML, it is not going to load that, right? Okay, so what you can do, you can use the string anywhere in your HTML. Basically, if you give your style as in font family, then it will trigger, okay, at this point I wanted to load those dependent, you can say, font over here. Now this is very cool. You can do the similar kind of thing using program also, right? Using JavaScript, basically you can create a div and basically add a style font family something to this, right? Similarly, you can add it like add it to the body and basically put some content inside that, so that it works in different browser as well. So because different browser works in different fashion, some browser expect not just the font family, the container should have some content as well, right? So you can put some dummy content and you can take a control by using some program as well. So this is very small and hidden gem. Data URI, as it says that you have your data inside a URL itself. So what it meant by, you can have a font family, and this SRC itself is a base 64, right? Encoded, where you have those font related information in the URL itself, and you can basically use it for any font. So instead of having too much big font families, you can have a small one and you can use as an inline as well. But again, you have to make sure whenever you have base 64 encoded, it comes with a cost. Your file size is going to be increased. So use it very intelligent, on certain conditions only. But yes, it works if your font family are small, right? Don't make another request. Use data URI for that. Preload. This is another very powerful thing. What it says that I have a dependency on font which is very critical, and I want that font to be available when I basically load my page. You can do a preload of this font. How? You have a link, you can do a relation as an preload, provide your font URL and just say this is as in font, right? You have to pass the type. This is a font of type, and obviously cross region you can pass in order to make this request cross region. I've discussed this in more detail in the previous network optimization, where you will find the other version of the preload prefetch as well, and you can learn over there. But yes, this is something, a good thing. Just give a shot. Subset of web font is again very important. Sometimes people don't realize, they just wanted to club all the format of fonts and the weight basically that may be required, or you can say different version like Roman, italic and all sort of in a single font. Like it comes with a cost. Why to club that, right? You can split those web font, or you can be choosy like what basically you need in that web font, right? You can create a subset and basically use that subset. So there are multiple tools which helps you to create a subset of multiple combinations, and basically you can use as a data URI as well, and you can host that subset somewhere so that you have a light version of your fonts, right? Asynchronously loading the style sheet, and style sheet internally has a dependency on, say, suppose some font, right? What you can do, if this style sheet is not critical for your first fold, or you can say the critical rendering path, in that particular case you can just define initially the media is equal to print, or just give a media which you don't want to basically leverage in the first shot, and then once it is loaded, just trigger and convert this media to all. Basically this is a small technique basically which will help to delay the load of the font, and obviously you have talked about the display as a descriptor, right? So that is a small technique which helps you to load your style sheet and the dependent font asynchronously. Let me help with a very complex scenario, or there are multiple approaches combined together which can help you to serve your fonts very easily and effectively, right? First, try to pre-connect to the domain or the subdomain where your font is hosted, so that you have a handshake ready. Second, try to preload your font. right? Such that once your website is loaded, you already have those fonts loaded. Third, once your website is ready, try to basically swap your media to all such that your style sheets convert into the CSS home, right? As soon as possible once after loading. Third, fourth thing, have a backup. Say suppose you don't have JavaScript, in that particular case, at least it can load directly from your link which you have provided. Using these small techniques and the combination, you will be able to load your fonts very easily and very effectively. Font face observer, this is again very cool where technique where programmatically you can take a control and decision what font and when basically you want it to load. So what it says that, as we have talked, until unless you use that font family inside your DOM somewhere in your style, it is not going to be loaded. What we are doing over here, we have multiple SRCs trying to load from the different format. We have given this Leto, right? What we can do, we can basically initialize our entire content with the you can say sans serif, basically where your body will have this font family. But again, you have defined a class which says that if this class is already defined, then probably use the different font family. By default, you won't have the fonts loaded class added to your body, but again, you can add this programmatically. How you can do that? So there is a package which is called font face observer, which helps you to basically make a decision once this font is loaded, then probably you wanted to basically add a class name or do any operation. Basically it gives you a callback. What we are doing, once it is loaded, okay, I want to just replace my class name of my document with the fonts loaded, right? In that particular case, once you load it programmatically, then you just go and replace the class, or basically in short, your font family, where you can leverage the controlled way of font loading, right? This is very cool, and most of the places, most of the web app uses it. So why don't you try it? CSS optimization, this is another asset which, if you don't optimize it properly, it is going to hamper your web vitals and your page performance. So CSS is something which comes with a cost, right? So now in now era, people have started writing so many styles, so many stylings basically, which makes your website very appealing, or you can say your web app very appealing, right? If you don't have your styles or your CSS, your web is going to look something like your skeleton, which no one likes it, right? So if you have two web app, if one is very appealing in terms of the styling and second is normal application, then definitely your users will try to go to the website which is web app which is more and more appealing in terms of the design, right? But we have to be very sure your styling should not compromise or come with a cost of a performance, because that is very important. So let's learn in this going forward, like how to optimize your CSS. Let's learn all those techniques. First, have your critical CSS rendered, like work on your critical CSS rendering, so that you should start rendering some piece of your application of your web app basically, in order to showcase something to the user, so that user don't have to wait for a longer duration in order to see something on your web page, right? So what you have to do for that, you have to break your CSS, load the CSS which is critical first. When I say critical, what are those critical things? You have a header, you might have sidebar, you have some sliders on the top. There are certain things which are very critical. So don't club all of your style in a single file. Try to split depending on the criticality. There may be a theme that you wanted to use. Have those different CSS files and load those CSS file depending on the criticality and the uses, right? Don't load everything. So with that, the concept says that splitting your critical CSS and loading at the top, and after that load other CSS in a different fashion. What is that different fashion? Will be talking about how to asynchronously loading your CSS files, right? But we have to understand why this is critical, and why even if you have a heavier CSS file, why it is going to hamper your page rendering. In the first scenario, if you see, when you have your progressive rendering or your optimized CSS where you have a critical CSS rendering, you see you have at least something rendered, some styles are there on the top, and then probably the styles and the other things basically got loaded for the other thing. But in the second case, once you was not having your CSS basically loaded, your entire rendering was blocked and your page got rendered once the CSS was loaded, right? This is very important. Now let's try to understand why this basically happens. Okay, so we'll understand from this diagram which we have discussed in very detail in our previous session, which was related to the network optimization. So in this case, we have to see, you have your web page, your web page may have multiple, you can say, items. You have HTML, your HTML can have multiple things that it is waiting for. It may be waiting for your CSS and it may be waiting for your JavaScript, right? As you know, your JavaScript is your blocking, right? When I say blocking, is parser blocking, and your CSS is your render blocking, right? Your DOM is not going to pass until unless your JavaScript is loaded, and in case of CSS, your rendering basically blocks, right? There are different ways that we have already talked, and we will be talking more in terms of why and how this parsing blocking for JS work. Let's concentrate on CSS. In case of CSS, we know if it is loading, your render is basically blocked. It is not going to show anything. Once it is loaded, what we do, we basically pass the CSS, we create the CSS OM, and finally we build paint and basically create the layout and basically render it finally, right? On the screen you see the pixel perfect thing. Now, if your CSS file is huge, definitely your entire page, your entire HTML, the final layouting and basically painting of your DOM tree is going to go for a toss, right? So for that, you have to understand if this is very lightweighted and this knows these are just critical things that I wanted to have in this particular file, so that at least my first code on the screen is basically pixel perfect, or you can have all the required styles, then you don't have to worry about, right? Okay, so let's talk about the second part. How to, when we are splitting the two CSS file, how to make sure we load the other CSS file in a async fashion or in a non-blocking fashion. Let's discuss. Let's talk about another CSS optimization technique, lazy loading. Although lazy loading is common technique, like lazy loading of every asset that you can think of, but how to do a lazy loading of a CSS is very important. Let's talk about and dive into that. So when we talk about CSS, so when you build any real large scale application, in order to support for, you can say, multiple user, multiple devices, and multiple versions and lot more thing, right? So in that particular case, what matters is, like, you have to write the CSS for different device support, right? Like for printing basically for different media, you wanted to have some different you can say CSS, right? For a portrait or in vertical direction, you wanted to have some different, like for tab you wanted to have some different stylings altogether, right? In order to have that, instead of writing all the CSS in a single file, try to split it depending on the media in which you are going to use it, right? And while importing or writing that link statement in your HTML, just make sure you add this media attribute, right? Just adding that media attribute serves lot of things. Now browser knows that depending on what type of media you are going to consume this HTML for, or your web page for, it will automatically load those CSS files. So out of box it is giving you optimization, then why not to utilize it, right? As simple as. So don't forget to use this media. If you're not writing media all, probably in that particular case it will expect you are going to load that for all the medias, right? So it is, if media is not available, it is equivalent to all. Now let's talk about the other important technique, which is very important. So we talked about critical rendering of CSS, right? CSS rendering. In that particular case, we talked about we wanted to load only the CSS which is critical at the top. But what about the other CSS I wanted to load? That is very important. May not be important because that is not a part of that particular thing then and there. But what about the other scenarios I wanted to use it in the other places, right? Maybe I wanted to click, I wanted to show the dialog. In that dialog, basically that CSS is required. Now, multiple ways. One, you can add a script at the bottom which is responsible to create a link tag and basically attach your CSS and load that CSS basically by attaching that link statement into your head basically, right? So this is one way you can basically leverage. Okay, this is how basically any of the CSS you wanted to load dynamically or lazy loading, you can basically use JavaScript in order to load it. Now, what are the other ways? Let's talk about one more important way. Okay, so this is a way, which is a third way, where you wanted to preload your styles. Like you want your styles to be preloaded so that it is not blocking your parse, or you can say the rendering of your web page. But at the time once everything is loaded, you just apply your CSS, right? How this works? You use a link tag, you add a preload, you add your CSS, it will basically load your CSS. But you are going to convert this particular, you can say, style into a normal style sheet by writing this statement which says that onload, just make this onload is equal to null and just add a relationship as a style sheet, which says that this style.css is a style sheet, so that browser knows, okay, I'm ready to basically consume it and basically pass it and basically create a CSS OM and apply and do a rendering, right? Now, what happens in case there is no JavaScript, or your JavaScript is blocked for a particular web page? For that, you can have a fallback, writing a no script, adding a link tag, and just passing the style.css, which says that if JavaScript is not available, then also I will make sure to load your style so that your web page is intuitive, right? You can just see your web page in a good fashion, although it sometimes is very difficult if you're not doing the server side rendering. We'll talk about that, right? If you're doing a client side rendering, you have to depend on the JavaScript, so not to worry. Now, one important thing I wanted to talk, although I will be talking those things in the next video, which is related to the build time optimization, which is you can also use emotion, or you can also use basically styled component if you are using any of, you can say, React or like CSS in JS format, so that you can have inline styles basically in your component itself, which will help to load the CSS along with the component instead of loading everything in a single go, right? Those are the different techniques that we will be talking about when we actually dive into those respective, you can say, build time, or you can say the framework related stuff. So let's talk about another asset optimization, JavaScript optimization. What? Don't worry, to all the JavaScript lovers, right? So although we love JavaScript, we write a lot of JavaScript, but we have to make browser feel the way we feel about the JavaScript, right? So for that, we have to optimize the JavaScript. So don't worry, we will be talking about some of the optimization which will help to create more love for the JavaScript, like your browser is going to feel the same, the way you feel, right? Let's talk about all the JavaScript optimization techniques that will help it to make more optimized, or you can more performant. Yeah, using differ or async, basically we have to understand, like, this is one of the easiest way in order to optimize your JavaScript loading, right? Files loading. But again, like, few techniques, if you can get a lot of benefit, then why not to learn that by heart, right? So although I have explained this in a lot more detail in the network optimization, but let me give you few glimpses over here. Now, your JavaScript, like, you have a HTML, right? Your HTML get parse, like parse is like line 1, line 2, line 3, tuck 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 tuck, all till the bottom, right? It encounters any of the script, browser say, dude, this is something which I got very critical, I need to load it. So if you see, this green line is something which says that I'm parsing, tuck 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 tuck, I'm passing. I encountered a fetch, which is your script. Oh, I need to load, okay, I'm going to load it. So I will download, my parsing is stopped, is halt, right? I'm going to download, which is my blue line. Once I've downloaded, okay, I have to execute this also. Like, now the execution of that script will happen. Now once it is done, again, tuck 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 tuck, your new lines will basically get passed. This is how a normal script basically loads. Over here you have to see your parsing, or your things which are going to rendered on your browser is basically blocked till the time your script got loaded and it got basically executed. Now we don't want to compromise it, because your JavaScript file can be heavy, and we don't want users to basically not be able to see anything on the web page or your web app, right? Now what we come with, something called differ. In case of differ, what happens? You're doing a tuck 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 tuck, there is a fetch request, okay, make a fetch request in parallel, I'm going to pass it, tuck 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 tuck, I'm passing. Meanwhile, in mid time, your script got loaded. Once your parsing is done, it saw that there was a script which got loaded but it is not executed, I'm going to execute it, and you see your executions happens over here, right? This is how your execution basically happens. This is got executed. Now there is another way which is called async. In case of async, what happens? You have a parsing, tuck 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 tuck, you find a fetch, you send it for the fetching the script. Now your script is loading, which is blue one, your parsing is still happening, and once your script loaded, what it says that, dude, I am loaded, let me complete my work, and then you can start continue your parsing. Now the red one which says that execution, I'm going to execute, which is a script. Once execution is done, again your parsing get start, tuck 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 tuck. So basically you will see your some of the pieces got rendered on your web page, but again other got halted for some time because your script was executing, and then basically again it started, right? So this is another way, but most of the time your differ is basically preferred, because you don't want any of your passing to be halted. You want to execute your script once it is done. Now there is another very important thing which is called script with type module. So you can have modules basically loaded directly into your ESM bundle, basically directly loaded into your application or your browser, basically, where browser knows how to basically leverage it, right? So you have ES6 bundles that can be loaded very easily. ES bundle, basically what I meant by it, right? So those can be loaded and browser understand how to basically execute that. Now, by default, any of these script which is of type module, which we'll be talking more detail in the next video, which is more related to the build time optimization, how to create that and how to make sure like what happens to the browser which does not understand the module or which are not able to basically execute your types, right? We'll be talking about that. Don't worry. Now, you find it as in type module, what it will do, it will automatically load this by using a defer technique. And once your passing is complete, it will basically execute. This is awesome. But if you want your type module to be async, you can basically set a async over here and you will see the same thing. Your passing went, you find a fetch, you made a request, your request got served, and finally once it is downloaded, it executed, it halted your passing, and finally your passing started and it ended up, right? This is how async versus defer work, which is very most important thing in order to make your performance application or web app more performant. And obviously in the interviews this is a most asked question. So prepare this very well, and if you wanted to go into the more detail with more examples, just go and check my previous video. Over there you will find more relevant examples. Let's talk about another techniques in order to make a love for the JavaScript, right? We talked about loading. What about execution? We'll talk about that. We talked about load time optimization, right? What about the computation, right? When you have a JavaScript, when user is performing some activity, over there you wanted to optimize certain things, your computations, right? Taking example of computation, you have analytics board, you wanted to do a lot of massaging, right? You wanted to plot the chart for the different data where you have to do massaging. You wanted to do something image processing on the UI, you wanted to add a blur effect, or you wanted to add different effect, right? You might have seen in the canvas application. Now in case of your draw.io or any of this, you can say whiteboard application, you have to draw on the canvas, or a lot more things that need to be done, right? Over there also there are a lot of computation that is done. Any gaming application that you see on the browser, over there also a lot of computation has to be done. So instead of doing that on the main thread, because it blocks and you don't want your users to be blocked basically for certain duration until that computation is done, what do? You don't do those computation on the main thread, you do in the worker thread. So this worker thread is basically, it comes with some certain limitation, like you can't basically do a DOM manipulation or the canvas manipulation basically on your main thread or your basically DOM tree, right? This is again like some limitations. We'll talk about that in more detail. But again, okay, I can initiate a web worker in order to do any of my heavy lifting computation, but how do I communicate between the main thread and the worker thread? The way is used is the post messaging. So using post messages, you can basically communicate between these two threads, right? So that's how basically any of the heavy computation you can just give to your worker, and there can be multiple worker as well, right? You give to your worker once done a job, it will basically give you basically the data back and you can utilize it. Now let's see some glimpses, some code snippet, how to basically write that code and basically how to get it done. Okay, so let's see from this example. Okay, so let's understand first the use cases, when to use and when to avoid basically using your web worker. So any code block which takes a lot of time in terms of the computation, you can use the web worker, right? Anything which has a small input and output so that your communication is very fast, you can use it. Like, so anything which has given request, I will get a response, such pattern you can leverage it. What you should avoid, anything which is dependent on the DOM manipulation or user input, where user is basically looking for some output on an almost real time, right? In those cases, try avoiding using the web worker, because obviously the communication is going to take some time, right? Now let's have a glimpses of how those code snippet look like. So you get a API where you can basically create an instance of this worker. You just write your script inside that. You can Google it out, you will get a very simple script how to write a web worker script. You can write your plain, you can say JavaScript logic in order to have some computation inside your web worker. Now how this messaging happens from main worker, main thread, basically you wanted to send some data, you do a post message, and when you wanted to get the data back, where your web worker is basically sending your data back, in that you will get that message in a on message. So inside your event you can have the type data in order to differentiate in what case what sort of data you are getting, right? So those communication mostly happen in a post messaging way, where you post the message and you get some message, right? And you do some computation on top of it. This is how basically your communication between the main thread and worker thread happen, and this is very important, most used, you can say, technique. Here we come to the end of the asset optimization session. So in this we have learned so many things. We talked about the image optimization, video optimization, font optimization, CSS and JavaScript optimization, right? There are so many assets, so many cool techniques that we have learned. So I hope you learn few things at least in this session. And in the next session, we are going to cover the build optimization. In the previous session, we talked about the network optimization. There are so many cool things that are coming, right? So if you like this session, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe, right? Keep watching Chakde System Design.